I failed to do that at the beginning, but I took some copious notes. So, so we're good to go there. Go ahead and share the screen.
My sound's still on? It's awful quiet.
The sound is still on because I can't
Okay,
multitask, Bert. If I'm trying to do this stuff, I have to either talk to myself or say nothing at all.
Yep.
Okay. Here's here's the presentation. I put this together to kind of walk us through the points that have to be brought up and discussed at the meeting. So indulge me on that. It's an organization thing that I thought would be helpful to all involved. So let's start with the reason why we are here, the objective of the meeting today, and the substance of the vote that the board will be asked to make at the end of the presentation. And I'll just go ahead and read it. The mayor recommends changing the PAMP cargo dock design from that which was approved by the assembly on June 22nd, 2021. And there's the assembly ordinance 2021-56 that codified that action, to a cargo dock design that supports 100-foot gauge cranes and has a continuous deck of equal width end to end with crane rail that runs the entire length. Do you concur? So it'll be a yes or a no vote when we get to that point in the conversation. In way of review, this was the basis of design that was approved by the assembly in AO 2021-56. Terminal 1 was exclusively for lift-on, lift-off and other types of cargo, and Terminal 2 was exclusively for totes, roll-on, roll-off arrangement. This is what, this is a cartoon. That previous one was a cartoon. This is another cartoon and we purposely left off any dimensional information or anything like that because there's a designer of record that is going to get hired and be brought on board and to come up with over the course of the next year, come up with what those actual lengths and widths and heights and all of that are going to be and what appurtenances are going to be included and on and on and on. But this is just the basis of what it is we are looking to see we have at the end of the design process and then delivered in construction. I've asked Jacobs to sort of mock up what the kind of profile view of this would look like if you were standing on the south end. This is kind of standing on the south end looking north with the 100 gauge crane, that the mayor directed, and a little bit about how the operation would work. I'll talk 50,000 feet and then I will turn it over to David to walk us through some crane gauge conversation. But basically 3 cranes, that requires 3 lanes. And then there's space between 2 of the lanes so that there's a place to put the hatch covers and not disturb the driving operation or otherwise hinder the driving operation when there's a container ship being serviced by the cranes here at the dock. Then the rest of that width, when we move the cranes out of the way for any other business, is there's an available width for any other kind of cargo operations that are going on the dock, and there's no sense in. And we'll talk about this a little bit later. There's a configuration with the gantry cranes that you can use that won't interfere with tote ramp operations at the north end. And David, with that, I will turn this over to you.
Thanks, Steve.
Stop sharing. You could share.
Yeah, sure. I'll share in a second. I apologize for not getting these slides out to everyone, but we decided to add this section to the meeting yesterday, so I was still putting together the slides last night, but I will forward this to the group afterwards. So let me just share my screen here. I don't think that's what you want. Can you all see the presentation?
Yes. Yep.
Yes.
So let me enlarge it a bit. So I'm going to go through, this is something we've been doing over the last 6 weeks or so, go through a quick discussion of the different crane rail options that have been under consideration over the last few weeks, sort of leading to why reducing the crane gauge from 100 to 50 or 64 or anything less is disadvantageous to the program and to the port, but show you some modifications that we have made to the design that we discussed back in August to accommodate some of the needs of the users. So this is the original concept, or this is the concept that was approved in the August meeting. It's the one that's gone to 15 and now 30% design. It incorporates a 100-foot crane gauge with hatch cover storage between the rails. We believe that 3 lanes can be accommodated, though there's the users would prefer to only include 2 there and accommodate another in back, which I'll get to in a second. This, I guess we don't want to call the 100-foot gauge necessarily a standard size crane, but it's a common size crane that can provide us the reach, not just for the vessels that are expected as part of Matson's fleet, but potentially the next level up in the smaller post-Panamax vessels if they are needed. Why is that important? It's important because this is a 75-year, there's a 75-year design life for the pier. So even if in the next 25 years we're not expecting to accommodate larger vessels, we don't necessarily need to assume larger vessels are going to come within the next 75 years, but we certainly have to allow for the possibility in our design. And so anything that facilitates expansion or modification is something that the port needs to consider, especially if it comes at a lower cost at the moment. So we believe this option has multiple hatch cover storage, but that you'll see that question will become moot in a second here. The initial cost of this, and I'm going to do a cost comparison table at the end, so don't feel you have to remember these numbers. The initial construction cost of this is $598 million. Now you all have seen the 653 or so million for the total project. That incorporates design, program management, construction management costs like that. But the base construction cost is $598 million. And what we're calling the future cost is $149 million. And I'll explain what that is in just a second. This is a look at the same cross section with the existing structure in place rather than showing the trestle that you saw in the last page. But this is what we are considering when we consider the future costs. The port has asked us to consider, okay, what will the cross section of the port look like if we ever have to go to more than 3 cranes with the 100-foot gauge? What that means is we build a back reach area to that behind the facility that we'd be building now, taking the hatch cover storage from this area to this area. The advantage of the current design is that we would be able to install this platform in the future without disrupting the ongoing operations. Okay. Second, let me move on to the next one. Okay, the other alternatives that we're, oh, sorry, this is, I wanted to go into this. This is what it would cost to build that fully expanded area with a back reach to the 100-foot gauge crane initially, right? So this is what, you know, we consider the highest end terminal that we designed for the 100-foot gauge at this point. If we built this terminal initially, it would cost $731 million roughly, which is, you know, 130 so million more than what the current design is. It would have to be 164 feet wide based on the dimensions that have been provided to us by Matson for the hatch cover storage. And so, you know, coming up with that in the short term when we don't need it, there's not really a fiscal advantage to the city for that, nor even there's a slight operational advantage, but not one that in our mind warrants an additional $130 million investment in the short term. And keep in mind that these numbers, when we're talking about these numbers, we're only talking about Terminal 1. So if this concept is extended to the full length of Terminal 2, those initial costs become roughly double. All right. So, yep. Does somebody have a question? I heard somebody say something.
Darlene, do you want me to hold questions to the end or as you're going?
You can ask now.
So just so I understand, what is being proposed is 100 gauge cranes with hatch storage directly below the crane itself with the option to build out this additional hatch storage area outside of the crane. Is that?
Yes, effectively. But there is a slight modification to that first concept that I showed you, which provides an additional width for a truck lane behind the crane in the first phase. Okay, in the initial phase. So I'll show that at the end, but it's a slight modification of what I showed you as that concept approved in August. Okay. Anything else?
No, thanks.
All right. So the reason that we've gone back and been asked to look at this is that there was a suggestion that to accommodate hatch cover storage, maybe we need to think of going to a smaller crane to accommodate hatch cover storage in a back reach area without having to expand the width of the current terminal or of the current design. So this is the concept that was developed with that. While this does provide hatch cover storage area behind the back rail of the crane or the inshore rail of the crane, this comes with some real inefficiencies because there's a lot of wasted space between the crane rails. There's not enough space to actually put 3 lanes between the rails. So a third lane would have to be built behind the rail, and then the hatch cover storage would be built there. This comes out to a terminal width of 130 feet, which is 10 feet beyond the current concept, and it also limits. There are some disadvantages to the 50-foot gauge crane because it can't necessarily have the max. It doesn't have the same maximum outreach as the 100-foot gauge crane. And even accommodating the current outreach that's necessary requires a significant load be placed on the front crane rail, and that means a change to the structural design. And one of the issues here is any changes to the design as we're moving forward do disrupt the schedule. They don't the impact on the schedule depends on when the decisions are made or when the changes are made and just exactly how extensive that they are. But, going back and looking at this, a 50-foot gauge crane, which has operational disadvantages as well as additional costs and potential schedule impacts, it just didn't make a lot of, it didn't really lead to it being a positive on the decision side. So the initial cost for this is 661 million, which is 63 million above the current concept because of the extra width. And then the future cost, as indicated here, is if we have to go to 100-foot gauge, that maximum build out that I mentioned to you, and then a hatch cover storage behind there. Not only do we have to put in an additional crane rail, but we have to build additional width. And so there's a significant future cost associated with it. And I guess most importantly, on that future build out, we wouldn't be able to do a future build out without disrupting operations. And that ability to expand without interfering with existing operations in the future is a big positive over the current design. Now, the alternative 3, the 64-foot gauge with the back reach area, the reason this dimension was picked is simply to make the spatial arrangement as efficient as possible, giving you the minimum width that you need to put 3 truck lanes under the crane without having to build an additional lane behind it and then put your back reach hatch cover storage in there. This comes out to about 128 feet versus the 130. So this is actually cheaper than the 50-foot gauge option, civil works wise, has a slightly higher future build out for that expanded 100-foot gauge option. But this is a more efficient and cost-effective alternative than the 50-foot gauge crane from a pure construction cost standpoint. What I'm listing as future cost, again, this is something that may or may not ever be done, but it is ever be built, but it is something that we have to think about should the port ever have to expand. So in comparing the different options, that baseline alternative, as you have there, as you've seen there, it has an initial width of 120 feet. It has the smallest initial width and therefore has the smallest initial cost, right? The delta in initial cost that's shown here between the other alternatives and the baseline is indicated here. And then the future costs you can see there as well. But the baseline has, the greatest number of advantages, in our opinion, for operations. Number one, it accommodates the 100-foot gauge cranes, which have, the potential for a larger maximum outreach if needed than the smaller cranes do. It does assure the ability to serve the larger vessels through the 75-year design life, which the smaller cranes do not. And it is a common crane gauge, so the cranes can be more readily acquired, replaced, resold. Obviously, we can get custom-made cranes. I don't want to make it sound like the other cranes can't be obtained, but this also provides the fastest path to completion because it's currently already been designed to 30%. The structural design's been done, the crane loads have been determined, and the permitting for it's moving forward. The disadvantages are that the designated hatch cover storages do not necessarily meet the current user's preference, and that's why I'll get into the new alternative that Steve mentioned at the beginning. And it's limited to 3 truck lanes between cranes, and there's really no ability to expand without building that future build out. Alternative 1 obviously builds out all those advantages initially, but it comes with $130 million additional cost. It does have the longest construction duration too. So if we're talking about building that initially, we're talking about adding at least another year to construction, which defeats the the city's need and requirement to build Terminal 1 as fast as we can, right? So alternatives 2 and 3, these are, the advantages are that they meet the current user requests for hatch cover storage in a back reach area versus under the cranes. But beyond that, they have a narrower gauge, which has a limited or a lower maximum outreach than the larger crane gauge. They potentially require a longer construction duration because we'll have to re-permit, we'll have to build a back reach area, a wider dock. And if we have to accommodate a future crane rail back there in a future expansion, we would have to disrupt operations to do that. With the advantages of the 100-foot gauge crane, as Steve mentioned at the beginning, the mayor's recommending moving ahead with the 100-foot gauge crane. Now, recognizing though the limits of the baseline option, which are that hatch cover storage between the rails is pretty tight. It has been agreed. Yep, go ahead.
David, just before you move on, just to clarify the baseline width of the dock. As far as I recall, the baseline width of the dock that was approved was 129 and not 120.
In August of 21, that's true. But the width that was determined in the concept design, which was accepted by the advisory board in August, was 120. And again, we're going back and revisiting that because it doesn't seem like that was understood in that meeting. But the baseline, the baseline of 129-foot width was an entirely different configuration than what we're talking about. It was for a 72-foot gauge crane with a back reach area for hatch cover storage, right? And so that's where the 129 came from, right? So that is that had nothing to do with 100-foot gauge cranes. It was based on a different concept, and the 120-foot width in the baseline is what was put forward in the concept design and moved forward over the last year of design. Okay. Now, having given you all that background, though, it has been agreed, and this is what the mayor's proposing, is that we do widen the berth, which will the exact dimension will be determined by the designer of record that's coming on board, but it'll be in the 129 to 131 foot width range, right? So that there is a third truck lane able to be placed in this back reach area, which will widen this area to accommodate hatch cover storage more safely. Okay. So we're going to end up in that 129-foot width, Vic, but with the 100-foot gauge crane, which has the operational advantages and the future expansion advantages that that the city needs to consider. Okay. Now there is there's one concern about this cantilever structure here. May have to be supported by a brace, but we think we can accommodate it with a brace, and in doing so, we should be able to keep the structure the same and keep the permitting process and design process moving forward relatively undisrupted. All right. And I guess the one last thing I was going to mention is that there will be some additional structural costs due to the width that would be added here, given the negotiations that John and Jacobs are having with the GAC to reinterpret the seismic design requirements. We're hoping that cost savings related to that reinterpretation of the seismic requirements may offset that cost. So,
Hey, David, can I ask one question before I turn to split? Is that all right? Yeah. So do you have a similar initial cost for this that we could talk, that we could mention today? And also, does this eliminate any future costs for anything else? If we have to go
No.
with 4 lanes
It-
on the
no, if we would end up having to build a platform back in this area if we ever needed to go to 4 lanes under the crane and a back reach area.
Or we go
Okay.
back to putting the hatch covers, or we go back to leaving the hatch covers on the ship, right?
Correct. Steve, I don't have an exact number, but what I can tell you is that it's less than 63 million. It's probably going to be in the 30 to 40 million dollar additional cost range. But that is, and I point at 63 because that's the additional cost for the 50-foot gauge crane. The reason that is higher is because to accommodate a future 100-foot gauge crane rail, additional piles have to be driven. And in the case of this expansion that we're talking about, piles don't need to be driven. And I'm hoping that 30 to 40 additional would be offset by some of the seismic changes, the seismic cost reductions that might come out of the discussions with the GAC.
Would it be like the 598 plus the 3040?
Yes.
That's what I needed to get in my head. Thanks. Thank you, Art.
But that's what we're looking at, and that's what's being recommended by the mayor, and that's the concept that Steve's asking you to vote on today.
Couple questions, David. This is Art. You talked about permitting. So I heard the different, some 120 foot width versus 129, 130. So basically what you said, the permitting that's already in motion is based on the concept design that was decided in August 21. And
No.
then I guess
The permitting that's going forward now is based on the baseline 15% design concept.
so that's what's being proposed. That's the permitting that's already been
That's moving forward, right? And the biggest impact on permitting is the number of piles, right? So we keep this number of piles the same, we should be able to move forward without slowing down permitting.
and that's permitting for Terminal 1 only.
The permitting's being done for Terminal 1 and Terminal 2, and at the moment, it's assumed that it's going to be continuous, same structure the whole length, because that's what we at the time was considered the worst case scenario, meaning it had the largest number of piles. Okay.
But just so first, we've talked about this in this setting, but the permitting has moved forward, assuming it'll be continuous Terminal 1 and Terminal 2 at the same or mirror.
Yes, because if the assumption had been made that the smaller dock was there, and piles were going to need to be added to widen it, it would significantly slow down the permitting process. But subtracting piles, if the 69-foot wide dock continues, shouldn't disrupt the process.
Okay, and in your scenario analysis, at one point we had talked about, this concept. We've talked about a few concepts really offline, not during these meetings, but at one point the idea of low ready was considered, right, for Terminal 2. Basically have the piling density in order to support a front rail, right?
Correct.
And then Terminal 2's width smaller, and then in the future, 30 years down the road, should we need to go to a low terminal for Terminal 2, have that expansion then and have the burden of those costs at that point. Has that scenario been estimated to see what type of an economic impact it would have or cost reduction it would have right now?
Yeah, so just to clarify, Art, what you're talking about is, if you're looking at this current concept, you'd be basically building the 69-foot wide terminal at the north end with but putting in a crane rail right under the front row of piles to allow then this back rail to be built in the future for those cranes. So we put some preliminary numbers together back several months ago, but in terms of moving forward with this particular evaluation, no, we haven't put those into the current study because the current study was just asked. We were mainly asked to look at just different gauges. So, but I can provide those numbers relatively quickly.
Well, let's, subsequent to what we're talking about now, there's no associated revenue streams, right, with that additional infrastructure. So I think it would be good to know incrementally how much we're talking about, to have that additional infrastructure without an associated revenue stream, certainly, from the current user, but unless there's other associated revenue streams that we can identify now, that's an incremental cost that, as a board, I think we should consider, if it's the right thing to do or not.
Right. I can certainly get those numbers to John and Steve, within a matter of 48 hours. So.
So David, this is Bert. Hey, where is fueling fitting into this design?
So into this design, Bert, there's the only thing where fueling is fitting into this design is, the design of that alternate fuels point, okay, which is a subject of the petroleum terminal optimization study. I do want to show you, it's not really the subject of the meeting, but I do have a preliminary summary of our utilization requirements, which I want to set up a meeting to discuss with you and Lev and your group after this meeting, sometime later this week or next. But
just to be clear, I just want to make sure the capacity is still there. I understand it's not part of this meeting, but I want to make sure that it's still on the table.
Yep, it's still on the table, and in the cargo docks design, there is still the plan to put in an alternate fuel point or modify that as the study determines to make sense. But in terms of the decision being made today, the fuels isn't impacted by this particular decision.
And then, go ahead.
I was gonna touch on that a little bit when David is done and we walk through another set of slides before we open it up for a bigger discussion.
Okay. And then further to Art's question on what benefit we have with this new plan. The only benefit I see is that 40 million, well, we're adding 30 to 40 million for hatch cover storage, right? And so that's a benefit. I was just wondering if there was a cost analysis done to that improvement at all.
Well, I mean, we provided the cost to do that. Our contention still has been, sorry, I'm going to go back to this original, our contention is that this should work. And there are other alternatives for hatch cover storage, but I think for the sake of accommodating the request for hatch cover storage for a wider area for hatch cover storage and wider lane spacing, that's the reason that the municipality has agreed to go to add that additional lane. As far as what the business benefit is financially, that's something Matson would have to provide, but the cost, we've provided.
Hey, David, I don't remember this group asking for that hatch storage. Where did that request come from?
Oh, that's been in regular discussions with Mattson and this group. There's always been the concern that Mattson wants 3 lanes plus hatch cover storage, and they have debated the spacing, that the spacing here would be adequate for them. I have to admit that there has been a disagreement on that, but the municipality has agreed to accommodate a 3rd lane back here to allow for wider lane spacing and a wider hatch cover storage between the cranes.
And that's not the sole benefit of that, but we can get
No,
into
it's
that.
there's a safety factor to it as well.
David, I have just one more question right at this moment. What does this do to our timeline compared to the other plan?
Our what, Bert? I'm sorry, I didn't hear
Our timeline. For completion.
Well, the idea of this is it should not affect the timeline if we can build this as a cantilevered. Sorry, I'm going to go to the end again. If we can build this as a cantilevered or braced option and not have to add additional piles, it would just be a matter of casting larger deck panels, and it shouldn't significantly impact the design or construction schedule. It allows our permitting to stay basically, our permitting schedule to stay basically as it is.
So basically then, I mean, it's the timeline then, in your opinion, is the same. So I'm just curious
Yeah.
what risk we involve in the timeline, because when you say you shouldn't, we know it shouldn't, I mean, but it's kind of like, what risk do you have to the timeline, I guess, in the 2 proposals?
I guess any risk in the timeline isn't related to the design. It's just the same risks that are in the permitting and construction, procurement and construction schedule. Our greatest risk to timeline, if we continue with this particular design, is going to still be funding and obtaining funding.
Which is the same issue, with the original design.
Correct. That's why between the baseline and this, there shouldn't be any additional timeline risks. If we had gone with a smaller crane option that would require additional piles to be installed, then that's where not only is there a design schedule risk, but there's a construction schedule risk. But if we stick with this design with the same number of piles, and can do that, there shouldn't be any additional timeline risk due to the design change. It should be the timeline risks remain the same as they are, and are based primarily in obtaining funding.
Now, and just to piggyback on that a little bit, we don't have a designer of record on board yet. So what we're 25-30% is a concept.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why, Jacobs is not going to guarantee that there's no changes to either the schedule or the permitting is because until we get down into the details of anything, we're not going to know if there are any implications to either one. That will be the designer of records. With marching orders is to minimize or prevent entirely changes to the schedule or the permitting as much as they possibly can. But you don't know what you don't know until you get that designer on board and they actually dive into doing this. Yeah. So and which is why, this isn't the end of the conversations we have. Once the designer of record is on board, then there are going to be milestone responsibilities that we reconvene and discuss what they are designing and look at all of those implications as we go along. That makes sense?
You have another question?
Yep.
Sure. The design that's being proposed for Terminal 2, correct? So basically we can just duplicate the numbers for the total cost of the carpet docks.
You know, in its
Go ahead,
it's-
Steve.
algebra, just like that, in its simplest form.
I do think we should note then, since our last meeting was in June, I believe, right? August too, because we're talking about the August 21
Yeah,
meeting as well.
August of 22, because we tried to put in a new design
Right,
in August of 22. The assembly postponed it indefinitely. So the only one that is still in force is the one from 2021.
right. So I think from 2021, I remember the cost of Terminal 2 being in the 200 millions. And then in the proposed design we talked about for Terminal 2 in this August of 22 discussion, it was in about 460 million. We've now raised it again to 598 million. So the decision we're making, if we do approve this, right, we're talking about $400 million of incremental costs associated with this design. And I think it should just be something we fully can explain and understand why. I mean, at that point, right, we're talking about being stewards of public resources. So hopefully we have a really good reason for an identified revenue stream for that.
So Art, just to be clear, the 460 that you're talking about was for the narrower Terminal 2. So you're getting a wider terminal. You're getting, you know, the 460 to 598, or, you know, 640, depending on which option you do, is the additional width of the terminal plus the back crane rail, right?
Right. No, I just thought it, and I think we'll probably talk about this on subsequent slides, so we can do that if you want, but Toad hasn't been part of this discussion at all. So this incremental cost, like hopefully, you know, will go to, go to use somewhere. It certainly won't with Toad. So there should be some type of revenue stream associated with that significant incremental cost that we're voting on today.
I believe, so I'll let Steve speak on the tariff issues, but what this does do is it provides multiple ways of operating at Terminal 2, right? You said it wouldn't help Tote, but if Tote ever shifted to a lift-on, lift-off operation, or even a partial lift-on, lift-off operation, they would have this ability and would not need any additional capital cost at that time.
Well, that's kind of why I brought up the other scenario, right? That we've been have those type of discussions. Our Orca class ships, and I mentioned it at the last assembly meeting, they have 20 to 30 years that we just did additional capital into those vessels. They're not going anywhere soon. So that's up front of significant incremental dollars 30 years before it's required. I don't know if that's the right thing for the public, right thing for Toad shippers, but that can all be discussed later.
Anything more for David? Okay, thanks, David. If you could unshare so I could reshare, that'd be great.
Yep, I'll try to figure out how. Hold on.
I think you did.
There we go. Okay.
Oh, yeah, because that's not me. Let me see if this goes back to me. Okay, so let me walk through a little bit of the logic behind why the port and the port owner has a little bit different perspective on what the requirements are for the Port of Alaska. And I'll just walk through these talking points and we can debate them later. First things first, the municipality owns the port. It's not the Port of Matson. It's not the Port of Marathon. It's not the Port of Menzies. It's not the Port of Tote. It's the Port of Alaska, owned by the municipality of Anchorage. We have preferential user agreements with the two ocean carriers that call here on a weekly basis, which gives you preferential use of the dock 2 days a week. Those other 5 days, they belong to us to use as we see fit. So when we're looking at what it is this facility should be looking like and capable of doing, it has to go beyond what it is we are used to seeing happening here on a on a weekly basis. There are going to be other users, and there are even other users now. And the flexibility needs to be the municipalities to determine what that infrastructure should look like so that we can support all of that. But at the same time, we have to acknowledge the fact that you guys have business models, markedly different business models, but you have business models that we cannot hinder by what it is we are constructing for the future. There may be more there when we're done than you need to do what it is you're doing now in your neighborhood. But at the end of the day, we will do nothing that's going to prevent you from being any more efficient than you are now. So that's kind of the context that we are putting all these decisions in. The other thing that I think we have to acknowledge publicly, and have not done a great job of doing that in the right forums, is there are 3 missions that the port is responsible for supporting that we have to take into consideration. One of them is commercial operations here, commercial operations of all of the port users. It tends to be the one we talk about the most, that everybody's arguments against what it is we're doing or about what it is we're doing are in the context of what impacts are on people's commercial operations. And that's why we are going to be very sensitive to not doing anything to adversely impact that going forward. But we also have a mission as one of 18 commercial strategic seaports in support of the Department of Defense. All of their deployments and redeployments and the oddball stuff that they bring up here now and the oddball stuff they may bring up here in the future, we have to be able to continue to support that mission with this facility. They may not be here as frequent and recurring a basis as the regular users are, but when they come, they are owed by this contractual arrangement we have with the DoD to get what it is they're able to do. In fact, if they don't like what we're doing, if they don't like our scheduling, then the requirement is hand them the keys. The port is theirs until they're done, and then they give them back. So we don't want that to happen. So we have to make sure that we have a facility that can accommodate both of these operations, and again, not adversely impact you when DoD is in town doing their thing. And the third mission we have is in support of FEMA and the State Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Management with respect to disaster response and recovery operations. There is not a single federal or state disaster response recovery plan that doesn't assume this port is standing and capable of being a part of the solution with respect to disaster response and recovery for anything that is happening here in the state. It's just a fact of life, which means that we have to have the flexibility to handle anything that would come here to provide disaster response and relief supplies. Not just you guys stepping up to be part of the solution, but anything else that might have to come up here in that context. So those 3 missions are really, really important for us. Another point we want to make is what I like about this design is that it ups the number of options that for consideration of where to put this petroleum infrastructure. When you've limited the length of one side of the dock to the other, you've hamstrung somebody. It's either going to be in the way of where the ramp operations are because there's a hose tower or there's petroleum hookups in that area over there that could be a conflict or expensive to put in place in a limited size dock configuration, or you stick it down, you stick it down at the other end. This gives you the opportunity to move it up and down the dock in a place that makes the most sense, that is out of the way of everybody. And in a wide dock, you can put a hose tower, even if it's something you can roll back and forth. You have storage space that you can move it into that doesn't interfere with a larger deck operation should you need that. And lastly, from my point of view, is it really is a modernized version. It's a duplicate of the kind of configuration we have now. A contiguous dock of equal width that runs from end to end with crane rail. We have that now. So I took these pictures to kind of point that out. The one on the left You can see, I'm standing in Terminal 3, and you can tell I'm in Terminal 3 because there's one of the ramps, there's one of the tote ramps between me and the cranes. So that's got to be where I am. And that crane rail is there, and because we're not using it, it was filled in for safety purposes. The picture on the right.
Sorry, Steve, I'm not seeing your picture.
Well, you should see.
Yeah, I think it's coming, Bert. It took a while to pop up on my screen.
Okay.
Yeah, your presentation is lags behind what you're talking, but hopefully it'll be there quickly, Bert, because it just popped up on my screen. The pictures.
And if you got the email, if you got the email I sent yesterday, Bert, you got the PowerPoint in it. So I'll keep talking. Give me the high sign when it pops up, okay? And the picture on the right, same aspect, standing in Terminal 3, looking down the alignment with the gantry cranes to the crane rail that comes all the way down into Terminal 3 from Terminals 1 and 2. So we put crane rail all the way the length of the existing dock. What we didn't do, though, is we didn't run the bus bar the whole way. The bus bar stops short of coming into Terminal 3 because these gantry cranes are powered by the bus bar. And you couldn't run the bus bar into Terminal 3 and be able to safely do those ramp operations that tote needs for its roll-on, roll-off. So the bar was cut short. Had that not been the case, and this, again, it's dated technology. Had we been able to bring the bus bar all the way down here, and could we have done that, then we would have had ship-to-shore crane operations in both terminals, even today. But we couldn't to accommodate the ramps, cut the bus bar short. So again, we're not inventing a new idea, we're modernizing an old one. And the technology of gantry cranes today gives us the capability and the flexibility to be able to do this. And how is that? Well, when I was down in Savannah at the end of October, I took these pictures at their Garden City container terminal at the Port of Savannah. These, believe it or not, are 90 gauge cranes. They have 36 90 gauge cranes that they're weirdly enough replacing with 36 124 gauge cranes. So to David's point, it usually is not really about the gauge. It's about the height and the reach. You can buy any gauge you want and make any gauge you want work. They are going from 90s to 124s, but that's an aside. But here's how you power them now. It's a cable that runs along the length of the dock that is captured up on a wheel that's on the side of the crane. And as you move the crane up and down the ramp, it either rolls out more cable or it brings up more cable. You can run an operation like this the entire length of the dock today, and you're not going to interfere with roll-on, roll-off ramp operations. You have that capability to put these cranes anywhere you want on the dock, anytime you want. And it also gives you capability to add more. These are how they gang. They gang them up in groups of 3 so that the cables don't have to be ridiculously long. So I suspect we'll do something like that. But anyway, that's how it works. And it just does not interfere with roll-on, roll-off operations because, when you guys roll the ramps out, the front tires never do go and bump up against the bolt rail. They're always short of the bolt rail. So there's no concern about interfering with the, with the cabling that might, depending upon where we do it. And I also wanted to make note, there's 2 reasons why the port needs to have the flexibility to handle just about anything at any time. Because, as was mentioned, if it's a 75-year life that we're trying to build here, then we have to consider what might happen in 75 years. And, I'll look at it 2 different ways. In 75 years, we could very likely not see Matson and Tote here that long. It'll be somebody else. So we have to be capable of supporting the somebody else. Or it could be this very, very, very long working relationship with Matson and Tote, but you guys may change out the equipment. And to make that point, I just picked a couple of vessels that are in your inventories today that aren't like the ones that come here. So conceivably, something will happen, something could happen that will require us to be flexible enough to deal with these kinds of changes as well. You've got the Isabella that goes to Puerto Rico that doesn't have ramps at all. And Matson's got the Lurleen that goes from, I think, Oakland to Hawaii. That is a Conroe. So you need ship to shore cranes on one side of it, and you'll need ramps on the other side of it. If I was a bet man, I would say that we're more than likely going to see a couple of ocean carriers using something like this in the future, because you can't beat the flexibility that the Ro-Ro operation gives you guys now for the kinds of things you can bring in here, because you can't put them on a container, but they're on wheels, right? So again, as a responsible port owner, we've got to have a facility that we can have certainty is flexible enough to handle everything. And that's my biased point of view as the guy that's got to operate the port here and be able to support anything that comes in here anytime, kind of like we do now. Rome, our big limitations are now we're not deep enough and these cranes don't reach far enough. And we can operate some kind of an operation for cargo offloading in Terminal 3. We just asked you guys to move the ramps out of the way. You move the ramps out of the way and we can use it now because we have dock and we have width and we're not working around a self-inflicted shortfall that I view the now approved design as giving us for one of the two terminals. It hamstrings the port's ability to put much of anything else in what is going to be Terminal 2 as a consequence of the way that design is configured now. Okay. I hope, Bert, did the pictures catch up?
Yes, they did.
And with that, floor's open. Floor's open for discussion among the board members, after which I will make some time for our, I won't call you the public because you're not the public. You're interested parties to also ask questions. I'm sorry?
Did you want to keep sharing?
No, you know what? Good point. I can stop sharing so we can see people's faces and then I'll reshare because there's one more slide. No worries. Indulge me here for a second. All right. Sharing is paused. All right. Okay. Fire at will. And David, thanks for sticking around.
Oh, sure.
Sorry, like Steve.
I'm sorry?
I can start.
Yeah, no, please do. Okay, please do.
Just a couple comments on the presentation that I held. One of your slides says it's modernized duplicate of existing port infrastructure. And I would just say I understand what you're saying, but it's kind of factually incorrect, right? We're really expanding this port significantly.
We are, because it's modernizing. So, but the construct in my mind is the same.
Right.
It's a continuous dock of equal width with crane rail that run the length of it. That's going to be the same.
Right.
It's just going to be bigger.
But it's expanding and then the price tag has grown with that expansion.
And so let me give you the Steve Buffalo's opinion on that. I really don't care. I really don't care about that. What matters to me is the facility that will serve the purposes that the municipality wants it to have. And what it costs is what it's going to cost. And it's never going to be cheaper to build than today. In 20 years, sure as hell ain't going to be any cheaper than it is to build now. And that's, and when the assembly asks me, I'm going to say the same thing. So I have to.
My comment to that would be the three missions we have, right? You talked about commercial, right? Which you said is what this has dominated. The conversation has been dominated by commercial. But you also mentioned DOD, FEMA, and state. So this large expansion, we said we shouldn't focus on commercial. What I've heard today and what I've experienced is that commercial funds all of this. So by expending that much without an identified revenue stream from DOD or the FEMA or the state, commercial is just funding that so that there could be potential ability to service these sides in the future. In addition to that, it's taking upfront costs now that won't even be utilized by one of the commercial entities. So in my opinion, without having that identified, so if we need incremental infrastructure, just like we do in a business, if I ask for incremental capital, there should be revenue streams associated with, not just build it and they will come.
Yeah.
So to me, it's a poor use of really public resources, public funds to expand this type of an expansion without identified revenue streams on that. Tote's been, whenever we've been asked to be involved with this, we've said this is what we need. I understand that we want to be built to the future. We haven't been involved with this discussion until now. So to me, I think it'd be irresponsible for us to even vote on this, much less pass it.
Well, and I'll give you my, again, my opinion, in response to that as well. There are some federal and state funds that are being submitted here. There's one thing to talk about it in the context of the operations and maintenance of an existing facility. But I think the context that we're talking about right now is, how are we going to cover the cost of this modernization program? And I have to be fair, the state has already ponied up $200 million in support of this in the grants that they've given us for the modernization program. They've ponied up almost 300 million in the past as well as part of this. That most of what we've had in the past went into building the PCT, so we only had to borrow 20 million to finish that, as opposed to 150 million to finish that. And we bend over backwards and working with a grant writing contractor to bring in as much federal source of money as we can. But you're absolutely right. DOD needs to pony up greater than what they're ponying up now. And that's the conversations that we're having with the delegation to help make that happen. And how successful that's going to be beats the heck out of me. The good news is when they use the port, they pay their bills. So we do get some contribution from them to the cost of this thing that way. But from a construction standpoint, the states stepped up. I mean, maybe they need to step up more. That's why we never stop going back and asking them to reconsider every year. So from a how are we going to pay for the modernization program standpoint, there is contribution from the state and there's contribution from the feds. We can argue the degree of that all day long, but here we are, a government department that owns a piece of infrastructure that we're beholden to the municipal code for how the heck we're going to handle this thing. So we're not as flexible as a business would be. But everybody knows where the demand's coming from, because this place could fall in the water tomorrow. Shit, it could fall in the water while we're sitting here if another earthquake happens today.
Yeah.
So, we're playing beat the clock and we're trying our best to get as much money coming into this that isn't that minimizes as much as possible what the debt service coverage will have to be on the parts of the owner or the users. But at the end of the day, we could use your help in Juneau convincing legislators down there that it ain't 20 years ago. You can't pick up the phone, call Uncle Ted, and all this free money is going to roll in for your infrastructure, and you don't have to figure out a plan to do it yourself. And that's as much of a problem as anything else. I mean, I think we'd be sitting there having an entirely different conversation if we all weren't worried about this damn thing falling in the water. I really do. And so in my opinion, I just have to say there is other money besides what it is we are talking about collecting from the users via surcharging. I just wish there was more than that, and we are not going to stop our efforts to make it as much as possible.
And just to be clear, we're 100% on board with the urgency associated with this project. We just want to get it right. And you mentioned the $200 million that the state has said they're going to pony up. We're now talking about an incremental change of $200 to $400 million for infrastructure that may never be used. So that money we just talked about,
Never be used by you.
may never be used.
Maybe.
Do you have, but nothing's been identified to say, hey, DOD wants this for this class ship that they've.
Well, as a matter of fact, they
committed to this.
have.
They committed to bringing them.
As a matter of fact, they have, because what they intend to bring up here for deployment purposes with respect to the war plan, and what we have to sign up for, and what I have to make quarterly reports on to them as the state of the facility, and their requirement is 2,200 linear feet of dock. That's their requirement, because they need to bring in 2 of those big LMSRs that you occasionally see here. Their plan is to bring in 2, to move out of here the brigades at Wainwright and the one here at Rich, and do it all at the same time. They also want 25 acres of laydown area, which is harder nowadays to provide to them, because we ask you guys to please help us with some square footage so we can put them in it. We asked Matson to give up this yard on the other side of us over here so we can make a helipad out of it. So they can fly their helicopters in and out of here that are going to go out on the ship. And once the NES is done at the north end, then I'll be able to tell them specifically whether or not 25 acres of staging area is even left on the north end. Yeah, so I've broken the news to them that, 2,200 feet, you guys got to figure out a way to get 2 LMSRs in here for something that might be less than 2,200 feet, because we're only talking about building around 1,900. So they're going to get penalized by the fact that, we can't make a business case for having more than what it is we've been discussing with Matson and Tote now as requirements for your frequent and recurring visits here. And it would be unfair to tax you guys for something that DOD needs that you never, you're 9 times out of 10 not here to use it. So, that's been part of the rhetoric as well. And have I shared that with you guys? No, because in my world, that's my problem. It's not that's my problem to solve. It's my problem to be the guy that delivers bad news to DOD that you're going to lose linear feet on this dock. Figure it out. Because, if you are demanding it, then show me the money, because it's unfair to hamstring the users to pay for something that they don't need. But beyond that, we still, as the owners of the facility, need the flexibility to be able to support all of those missions the best we can.
But Steve, I need to clarify my memory, because from what I remember, the DOD was more requests than it was requirements. And that just by the nature of our location, we would always be a DOD port, and they would adapt to their requirements based upon what we have. That's what I recall in past discussions.
Yeah, and let me say it a different way, and you can tell me if you think I'm saying the same thing or not, Bert.
Yeah.
Used to be it was an out and out demand. The document that they send you and they made you sign up was a my way or the highway sort of document. But over time, all of the strategic ports have had conversations with DOD, and long story short, it became more of a negotiation than it is a mandate. But they wouldn't close the door completely on, if we can't come to an agreement on how we can do what we need to do for whenever we need to do it and not disturb your commercial operations, then we're going to play hardball, and we're going to delay your commercial operations until we're done. They have still left the door open to have to do that. So, I'm hard pressed to be a complete asshole, just like they're hard pressed to be a complete asshole about this. And that's why when we give these quarterly reports, I take great pains to make sure they know that, here's your 5 years notice that you may not have what you have now. Figure out what you're doing. They've got colonels and generals and staffs that can figure this stuff out. Shouldn't be our problem to solve their problem. And if they come to a conclusion that, the the only way they can handle this is either throw money at us or accept the shortfalls that they're gonna get, then the conversation's over. One way or the other, they're going to figure out how to accommodate themselves here. I think you're right. There is not another port that can give them the flexibility and the efficiency that they're going to get here. But Valdez is an alternate commercial strategic seaport, and so is Whittier. Don't ask me why Whittier, but so is Whittier. So they've got alternate plans. They don't like them. You get them in a room and ask them to admit it, they'll tell you they don't like them. But if push came to shove, they'd have no choice. So they have to think about those as well. I don't think we're done. The group's done yet, Lev. Hold your thought. Any other?
So just in summary of the DOD, then, the main benefit is, as I see it, is we could get increased funding from them by being a pro DOD port. Is that not correct?
You know, the opportunity for the delegation to impress upon DOD the need for them to cooperate is, yeah, that's where the leverage is. Yeah, it's not in me, it's not in the Muni. The leverage is in the delegation. And we've gotten a little bit of grant money from them for this through the DCIP grant that we got to work on our port power plant. But they haven't really embraced, what help they might be able to provide for us, or figured out, not embraced, figured out how to provide, financial support to us for the modernization program. I mean, there hasn't been a 4-star that's come down here that hasn't looked at this and understood that, DOD gets a benefit from this place being above the water line, every day for when they need it. But what they always say is, but we just don't have a mechanism to write you a check. We can't, we would if we could, but there's no mechanism for that. And that's why we keep talking to the delegation about, let's help invent a mechanism so that if DOD, particularly for the strategic ports, that, that DOD gets a leg up and an ability to help. There's going to be some language in this NDAA bill that Senator Sullivan and who was it from Washington State? Yeah, they've been able to get language into this bill that directs US DOT only on the grant side of things to open the door for more favorable consideration for grant requests from strategic ports in non-contiguous states. There's only 2 of us, Alaska and Hawaii. Because, I'm sorry, Jim.
Go ahead. I was just going to add something.
Because the DOD did a big study, DOD did a big study of the conditions of commercial strategic seaports. And I think the 2 worst ones in the country were us and Port of Tacoma. So there's language now in the NDAA that requests more favorable consideration for grant awards for infrastructure programs at these 2 strategic ports, because they're the ones that DOD pointed to and said are in the worst shape. So, it's a baby step kind of thing, as you're dealing with Congress, but the door is kind of creaking open to give us a little bit more opportunity to see a little bit more favorable consideration from DOT on these grant awards. Jim.
I was going to add, keep in mind that we have not specifically requested funding for the cargo terminals yet to the federal government, but we have positioned ourselves so that when we start asking for that funding, one of the big justifications is the DoD mission, and we've positioned ourselves so that both the Alaska delegation and DoD are set up to support those funding requests.
Yeah, what we found out in all of the grant applications that we submitted and stuff is if you're not in a position where you can intelligently answer the questions that they're asking, because they want to get down into details, then you're doomed to fail. And we're just not that far along with the design for the cargo docks yet, where we have enough detail to satisfy the questions that they're going to ask. But now we've got a couple of years of serious opportunity.
This year, fiscal year 2023 is when we'll start making funding requests for the cargo docks. The requests haven't been right up until this time. But so basically going forward, the DoD mission is going to rise in importance considerably.
So every now and then we'll reach out to you all to give us some information with respect to your business operations here. And for those of you that are in support of DoD in particular, so that we can get some of that information that we can put into these grant applications. We'd appreciate very much your help with that. Bart?
I just want to reflect on the capital stack for just a second. And listen, the mayor's decision to look into the future for the 75 years is 100 years down here was a bunch of tents. And here we are today. And if you look back in history, that's exactly the case. So I think that it'll never cost less than it's going to cost today. We know what the port cost when it was constructed. But in terms of the capital stack and the commitments, we achieved our goal last year of receiving $200 million grant from it was 100 plus 100 match. We're now at 75 of that 100. So we essentially, through the grant process, it required that it could have been local funds, but we chose the option to look at the federal piece. So that number is now, or very soon will be 300 million last year that we effectively put together in the capital stack. In addition to that, I think that one thing that kind of slipped by the radar because of the MARAD settlement that we now feel, I think today was another extension date on behalf of of MARAD, but that will too come to a close at some point. And as you know, we were unanimous in that ruling of $367 million. Say that it's, I don't know what the settlement, but just use a round number 350. So the capital stack already essentially is close to 850. No, excuse me. There's another component of that. We are going to the legislature, as many of you know, again this year with another $100 million request based upon the matching grant again. So we've already been in discussion with the Senate Finance Chairman about the request. Everybody recognizes what the Port of Alaska means to Alaska, and our initial discussions are very, very positive. And so you add those numbers together, and those are outside the tariff discussion entirely. You're up to around, well, I don't know, 300. You put it all together, it's probably $850 million before we start anything else. But the point of the Department of Defense, and we've had several discussions in Washington regarding that, the Department of, and the Bob Hope Classic, which is the new vintage ships for the Department of Defense, and those will be the requirements. We have been in discussions with the senator's office, and that opens the opportunity for us to tap into the Department of Defense. Without that, we really can't do that. But that's a strategic port to be able to handle those class ships, and so that's a major component of the total. And so, do we build it now or do we build it in the future? Well, I think the mayor's decision is we want to proceed now and look to the future, and so and look to those alternative funding sources that we have not had the ability to tap into. So that's just a kind of a capital stack look, and, we get focused on other issues, but, there's been significant progress made in the last year. There has. I mean, we never before have ever accumulated these amount of dollars in a shortened period of time. And the matching grants are all, actually gives us 5 years to accomplish that, not one. And we went from 0 to 75 million in 10 months. The advantage is also in terms of the star alignment, if you want to call it that. I would, that's would be my appearance, and I look at it, but Senator Sullivan sitting on Defense Appropriations Subcommittee, key position. So and he, in fact, as some of you probably will recall, a few months ago, he wrote into the record with the Secretary of Transportation, Buttigieg, when the discussion of the Anchorage port came up and the MARAD settlement came up, the senator put on the record, and the secretary agreed that those funds could be used for the expansion of this port, so that they couldn't offset other costs against it. And that's a huge thing, because the secretary committed it. It's on the record. And so I think that you have a key person as we look to those DoD funds, which is, they have a much bigger checkbook than anybody else. But as we accommodate and look for those funds, and at the same time, we now, Senator Murkowski continues to sit on appropriations. She is a ranking minority member, but she's number 2 on the Appropriations Committee. And the way that the U.S. Senate operates is that there are a limited number of people. We all have been told that earmarks have gone away. Well, they've gone away for everybody except U.S. senators that sit on appropriations. So the alignment between our congressional delegation, between the Department of Defense and Senator Sullivan's influence, and they're in working collectively with the Senator Murray, who, there's a synergy there that's been developed in a working relationship. In addition to Senator Murkowski being able to earmark funds in appropriations is a huge deal. It's the only state in the union that has that, only one. As you recall, in the last bill, our port received $68 million grant directly to the port, the largest of any port in the United States. Long Beach got 30 million. I don't know, whatever the numbers. Our port got the largest grant of anybody, and that shows. I think that speaks to the influence that our delegation, particularly in Washington, has, and working with the Washington delegation, because they recognize. And now, if we add the component of the DoD through this most recent efforts, I mean, we are aligned to really, I think, look to the future and pretty fair to say, without the need of through. I know it's all our taxpayer dollars, but we've contributed to it. But the more, every dollar that we can pick up is less dollar we have to consider in a tariff arrangement or some future. And the mayor is dedicated to aggressively go out at the state, the federal, the DOT level to bring those dollars to the table. So.
Yeah, and I mentioned the assembly last week, it's 68.7 that we got in the PIDP grant, and what we can match it with from the state's 100 million. We've covered the cost of NES1.
That's correct.
Which begins this spring and wraps up a year from now, which opens up that north end out there and should take the monkey off of Toad's back. That is, that we have these continuous winter challenges getting into Terminal 3, And it at long last might give me some nights I could sleep in the wintertime wondering how much infill we got today. So, and that's not costing anybody anything. That's all covered by grants. And our goal is to extend the need to really have a surcharge out into the future as far as possible. And that's that's why we're trying to do this. Mark, no?
I was just gonna say the one other piece is, with this plan, there is actually a business continuity / resilience piece. And that is that we can have failures. The failures can be either on the side of the dock or on the side of vessels. That this dock design gives us the flexibility to adapt to. So for instance, if our ship fire or explosion, whatever you want to call it, we had several weeks ago, had taken out a section of Terminal 1, the operation would be able to move north so that you could still do a lift-on, lift-off operation. If a towed vessel has an incident and can't make a delivery, we would have the option of bringing a container vessel in at more or less the same time as on our current schedule so that we could maintain business operations. It just gives us a flexibility that other plans don't give us.
Yeah, and that's always been the municipalities. Quite a few.
Sure. No, since you asked, I'd say there's cost benefit to all this. Bert brought it up earlier, right? The hatch cover discussion, right? We're talking 40 million, we're talking, give or take. To this point, we haven't been included in this and nor have had the adequate time to really analyze this stuff. I know, Vic, we talked hoping to get some of this information sooner than later to be able to come in here and have a vote. But for us, I don't see how we can take on this type of incremental capital based on the presentation today alone without having time to really digest and analyze. So that's kind of where we sit.
Yeah, and on the business continuity, also, if an earthquake takes out part of the north end of the terminal, with the correct trestle arrangement, you just move the towed vessel south and you could continue your roll-on, roll-off operation. We just have more dock available if part of it goes down.
Is that part of this design?
We haven't gotten to that final design. I'm just saying
That's why, yeah.
it gives us the flexibility to incorporate that sort of thing into it.
Yeah, there's things, that, remember, this is a basis of this. It's not the final stamp drawings. So there's plenty of opportunity to look at all of these other things. I mean, part of what the conversation we've had in here in house is, why don't we have the same number of ramps in both Terminal 1 and Terminal 2 spaced for the arcs? This way, I mean, that's really ultimate flexibility. I mean, that's another one of the considerations that we've been thinking about. Not only have the dock wide enough and long enough, contiguous enough for gantry cranes, but how about we add an extra trestle that gives us the flexibility for you guys to, if you feel like it, let's swap this one. I mean, we're talking about a contingency operation where nobody comes to the table worrying about how inefficient it is. It's just, we got to get stuff here. Yeah, we'll worry about efficiency when we're talking about our day-to-day business and back in peaceful times. But we're talking about what kind of flexibility in a contingency operation can we have. So yeah, there's lots of things we can talk about once we get the designer of record on board that we may not have discussed now. One of the other things that we've talked about is maybe we need one of those trestles on an angle. Because if we find ourselves in the business of supporting wind farm development, and people are bringing wind turbine farms in here, those blades on the modern, wind turbines are huge. And another reason why having the dock a little bit wider is you stand a fighting chance of making a 90-degree turn if you're coming off the dock. But if you got one of the trestles on an angle, then you don't have to worry about that too much. And you've not created the situation that we've seen here in the past where big stuff has come in, because this is the only place to bring it. Big stuff has come in and you can't get it off the dock unless you get people out there with cutting torches, taking the railings off the trestles. And we've removed the railings from the trestles so that pieces of equipment could make a 90-degree turn. So the first piece that comes off the ship takes 6 hours. The next 5 take 30 minutes each. but you don't want to have to keep learning those lessons, while you're trying to do an operation. It's time and money for everybody. So all of those experiences that we've had here, we're going to feed to this designer of record to try and get as much efficiency as possible. And, he's not going to not talk to you guys, but talk to you guys too. So we all have an opportunity to get this thing as efficiently as we need it for ourselves at the lowest cost possible. So, this is a cartoon that we want to hand to them that is kind of sort of, the concept that we think, and these are the critical pieces that we don't want to change. How long you think it needs to be is up for grabs. How narrow or how wide it needs to be is up for grabs. 100 gauge cranes is where we drew the line in the sand with respect to an efficient crane gauge for the best cost and potential availability afterwards. That's what we're talking about today. But the way the design advisory board language in the code is written, it says that any change to the design that has an impact of the lesser of $2 million or 5% of the overall project cost, the lesser of that has to come to this group to be voted on before it goes to the mayor to send to the assembly. So we're going to get lots of opportunities to come back and look at the cost component of this and what we're doing to it. Once we get to 65%, 95%, we're also actually required to meet at least 2 times a year. And we, the port, are required to give you guys quarterly updates on the progress of things as they're going along. So if we do all of that, then all of that data and all of that information with respect to what the cost is going to be and where we see it going, we'll get plenty of lead time advance to have to reconvene and talk about the really serious stuff before before it becomes a permanent part of the design. I don't know if that helps you feel any better, Art.
No, I just have a clarifying question and I'll stop talking. I apologize. Just about what you just said. The width is still up for grabs. Is that?
Yeah, well, because David said that too. We're wagging somewhere between 129 and 100. But-
Yeah, Steve, it's up for grabs, but only within a couple of feet. Yeah,
So
not,
Not necessarily the scenario I talked about earlier where we potentially fill in later. This is, you're just talking about 129 to 132.
Yeah, Yeah.
right. What's being asked for the group to approve is the concept of the back rail lane or the behind the rail truck lane. And between the rails hatch cover storage with 2 lanes between the rails. That's the concept. We're not
Yeah,
asking the group to.
yeah, that'll be
to
the capability,
settle on
but
a
between,
specific
in
dimension.
between ribbon cutting ceremony day and today, either Mattson as who's going to be the primary user of the ship to shore cranes, or Joe's Ocean Carrier Company, if they come up with a business model for operating on the dock that changes all that up, I don't care. I don't care how they do their operation. It's just that, I'm more concerned about, at the end of the day, is the flexibility in the design of the infrastructure, allow us to support more than just the 2 people we see more often than anybody else. Because we have obligations to others. I mean, that's where I'm coming from. I'm going to be agnostic on everything else. And I'm just going to give consideration to the fact that, I talked about a facility that I think is in the best interest of the municipality and the state and the feds that doesn't hamstring the current users from doing what it is they're going to do. I mean, that's where I'm coming from on this. Everything else, to include cost, I'm afraid, I don't care about.
And Steve, I guess to your point about the function of the board is that you're asking the board to approve what the functionality of the terminal needs to be, not necessarily approve the final specific dimension down to the nearest foot or half a foot or anything like that.
David, I would think that eventually we're going to see what the designer of record does. And that's eventually going to become something that we're all going to think is reasonable and be okay with. I don't think we're going to sit here quibbling over 18 inches. or anything like that. But there is no, it must be's. It must be this length. It must be this width. There's no must be's in it. All we're really talking in general now is continuous and of equal width. But wide enough to support 100 gauge cranes and how the users want to operate either underneath, behind, in front of, or beyond the 100 gauge cranes, I could care less about. The flexibility is there to do it the way the picture says or the way you want. I don't care. I mean,
Hey, Steve, can I make a comment? So, you know, a lot's been said, and you know, I think one of the things as well that I think on this new design or the design that's being presented, and I'm not quite sure who talked, whether it was Jim or on the resiliency. That's an important one. That's a key one, right? I mean, if we don't have and I'll go from a Matson side of it. If we don't have a continuous dock with rails all the way down that are 100-foot gauge or a similar gauge, whatever the gauge is, and Terminal 1 is for whatever reason determined to be unusable, then at least that gives the ability to work down at Terminal 2 as well. So I think going back to even the point or the question Art was talking about on the exact same facility on Terminal 1 and 2 that can be usable by either one of us would either Todd or Matson or anybody else for that matter that can come in. I think that's a critical and important piece of the design, and I fully support that. But the other piece as well that hasn't been talked about is also about the safety and the design of that current terminal as far as the width. So I think that brings in also a factor on the design of the facility with safety in mind with the people that work down on that pier. There are a bunch of other things that were said and really on the mission and everything, and I that's already covered, and that's really all I wanted to make a comment on. Steve, thank you.
Any other comments or questions from board members?
Yeah, I had a question regarding what cost are we looking at here for this change? Any idea?
Well,
Yeah.
Go ahead, David, you go first.
Well, I was going to say which change. So you saw the change, the additional 30 to 40 million for Terminal 1. The extension of the dock, you know, it ends up being roughly 600 million T2 versus the 460 as Art mentioned. But what I would, and so that's the rough figures, but I would caution using those numbers until the seismic design is required. As the 30% design is done, you'll get a better estimate. As the 65 and 95% designs are done, you'll get even better estimates. And we are expecting that with the negotiations with the GAC that there may be some seismic cost savings. So, you know, the budget from a program's perspective, the budget is what it's been approved at now, which is for the continuous dock, but the T2 being of narrower width. There's going to be a roughly, as we've discussed with the city many times, roughly $200 million, $150 to $200 million increase to widen it to the same width as Terminal 1. But hard and fast numbers, we got to do the design and improve the estimate every time we do the design. And I guess, and again, mentioning that we're hoping for some design savings or some construction cost savings if the seismic design standards can be reinterpreted, which John's working on. So that's, I know that's maybe a wishy-washy answer, but that's the situation.
Yeah, I don't know how to interpret that answer. It was you don't have any, so basically you don't have an idea or a ballpark on a range?
I
Does that
think
go
I just
back to-
gave you the, yeah, I
Well,
think
I
I
go
just
back to
gave
our-
you the range, yeah.
I go
So-
back, no, just the total range, because we go back to our meeting objective and it's basically the 100-foot crane and continuous equal with end-to-end crane rail. So just what's the price tag estimate that we're gonna be voting on?
We are not voting on anything but a concept.
Design, right?
Yeah, a concept, a basis of design concept is what we're voting on. The details with respect to what the total cost is gonna be, you know, and is gonna be fleshed out when we actually get a designer on board who's gonna start pricing out concrete and wiring and steel and on and on and on. And, you know, what's it gonna cost to keep the whales away? But, you know, and all of those other fun things. What's it gonna cost to keep the place open when while we're doing construction, so that we don't have to tell you guys get lost for 5 years. We'll call you back when we got a new dock built. I mean, all of that's got to go into the cost. And there's just not enough certainty to any of it to give you a number. And you know how this goes. Well, maybe you don't know how this goes, but I'll tell you what happens. You know, I could annoy you by not giving you a number today, or I could take the Juno approach, which is they hold a gun to your head for a number when you go down there to talk to them. And then when you go back the next year, it's a different number and they beat the living daylights out of you because you changed the number. You know, and they don't buy the fact that, well, you asked me for a number when I knew darn well it wasn't going to be the final one. So bear with us. You know, it's going to be in a range like, what's the PAMP going to cost? Well, it's going to be in a range between, you know, 1.8 and $2.2 billion. You know, live with that because that's the best we can do until we're done with the whole thing. And I can tell you the right answer. You know, it's the craziness of things. And as Alaskans, we've gotten into the habit of wanting to know a number without having a design to stand behind it and defend the number with. It's just too difficult, which is why today should be all about the concept, agreeing that, you know, enough thought went into this being the concept that we ought to proceed with this, knowing that if the costs begin to get crazy and unpalatable, you know, this group is going to get a chance to put the brakes on, because the process requires us to come back and look at anything that changes by the lesser, I love it, the lesser of 2 million or 5% of the overall cost. So in other words, if in the process of doing this, there's a change that costs $2,001, we're reconvening to talk about it. That's what it says. I'll bet you, you know, we'll probably be meeting on a monthly basis once we turn this over to the designer of record and they start talking about things. But those are the rules. Those are the rules. There will not be any surprises to any of you guys that the cost of this thing is changing for the good or the bad, because the way the rules are written, we're going to be upfront with that. That was a long answer, Bert.
Yeah, I kind of, maybe, how about this? Is there a percentage or a minimum cost you anticipate in the increase? And if not, I don't want to draw it out, just off the top of your head, you know, because you said you quoted
Yeah.
60 million. I'm just trying to get a ballpark, that's all.
Well, Bert, the terminal 2 is going to widen essentially by let's see, it would widen by about 30-40%. So you can pretty much use that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions from board members?
Procedurally, are we about to vote? or-
No, there's public comment time allowed. And then I'll ask somebody to call a question.
Okay, so can I, one more clarification, because this is important, right? You said cost isn't a component here, but But this is an incremental, big change in cost. My understanding of design advisory is that that's a part of what we're here for, is to say, we've evaluated the cost benefit of these of whatever change that we put forward in the design. This is a significant design change. So if we're not thinking about cost and or if we don't want to tell ourselves, we don't want to think about cost, we want to say we're just talking about design, we're accepting this cost increase with this proposal. And I think that should be made very clear. And correct me if I'm wrong, if cost isn't a part of what the design advisory board should be discussing, but it's a significant incremental cost with this change.
Well, it is, but the design advisory board is also not done after this meeting.
But it's but we reset the baseline with this vote, if this goes through.
We reset
at a higher level.
We reset the baseline, but how much we have no certainty on yet. That's my point, is we just don't know, what it is. But once we get, February, we go to the assembly to hire the designer of record. I would think by springtime, we should get a sense, we will get a sense of that, what that number is. And we'll probably have to reconvene and talk about that. But we'll have the designer of record here who can explain the whys behind it. But, intuitively, it's got to be more. I agree with you. Intuitively, it's got to be more. I wish we had enough certainty to know by how much we were.
Well, David, you said 150 to 200 is a decent guess.
Yes, the 150 to 200 million increase due to the width of the terminal. I did misspeak. It's about a 60% width increase, but the reason that you don't have a 60% cost increase is because a lot of the costs of Terminal 2 are built into the additional trestles, right? Are built into the 3 trestles. So it's about 150 to 200 million total increase, right? Based on the concept, right?
So I certainly won't try to convince anybody on the board to not factor that into their vote.
Yeah, I think Art brings up a good point. We're basically changing the baseline. We're not approving it, but we're kind of changing the level.
We are. Yeah, well, we are. The picture is markedly different looking than the first one. No, I can't object to that. So we've got, Lev, you've been very patient, waiting your turn. So you've got 3 minutes.
I appreciate that. Just trying to follow the procedure. So thank you for the time. Have a couple of questions, clarifications. I believe the strategic port designation, you get a little bit of recognition with that, but really this is to help us pursue federal money. Do we really believe that we're going to get more federal money than some of these rough numbers that are being thrown around? I guess that's concern number 1. Number 2, I want to bring back that when we were talking about temporary offloading, I think 2 years ago, 1 year ago, and using a bit of the Matson dock, there was a lot of talk of avoiding the cranes and not interfering with their operations, making sure hoses, piping, things like that. So would like to come back to the point that you made, Steve, that having a continuous dock provides more flexibility. I think at one point the concept was just to hang fuel infrastructure off of the middle trestle that TOT would have. So I just want to throw those out there for consideration. And really to say that without a fuel component, the basis of design is lacking a significant piece of what it will take to get things done, both construction and operations. Thank you.
Good points. Let me see if I can answer for sure the first one. Yeah, you're right. Being a commercial strategic seaport, historically to date, hasn't gotten any of the commercial strategic seaports any special consideration from DOD for money to come our way. It's a complaint we all have. Every time we get together annually and talk as at our annual strategic growth conference, it's the same, it's the same argument. It's just, there's a lot of demand for very little or no contribution to what it might be doing to the infrastructure. But that's now being acknowledged in Congress by some pretty high rolling people. Fortunately, for us, they're the delegation from Alaska and the delegation from Washington and a delegation from Hawaii that are speaking out in favor of giving a little extra special consideration to commercial strategic seaports. Has anything of substance come out of that yet? Nope. But it would be nice if at some point there, that gets some traction and we see those benefits. So we're not going to quit fighting because nothing's happened so far. And hopefully, as time progresses, we'll be successful in getting a little bit of acknowledgement, and other than a pat on the head for doing a great job, that something else will come out of it. To your second question, and I agree with you when we first talked about either making it temporary or making it permanent. There was a little bump that was put out on one of the ramps that was going out to, one of the trestles that was going out to a tote ramp as the place to put the quote unquote temporary fuels infrastructure. But that's as much, that was as much a cartoon as everything else was. And it was, if I remember correctly, if I go back and look, there was some kind of a red line that was drawn off of that that goes into whatever the existing petroleum infrastructure is. My point is, we don't know enough about what that would look like to be able to say with certainty that it's not going to interfere with that tote ramp or anything that they might want to bring down that tote ramp. And now we got to say, well, you can use all your ramps except that one because there's a hose tower or whatever the hell is in the way. This design, I think, gives us the capability to look at other options for not only the placement of it, but for what this temporary infrastructure might look like, and where it would necessarily have to go. So that's kind of why I'm again a fan of looking at making the design what I see it to be. There's a little bit more flexibility there for not only the users, but also for us when it comes to being able to get things out of the way for something else that we might be capable of using in a particular terminal. And I thought in your last point, I think was more a statement than a question. Is that fair to ask? Fair to say?
I guess it's a statement with kind of a question of at what point do we start incorporating that fuel infrastructure? Because we keep calling it temporary, but there's a little bit of tongue in cheek because if it's going to be in place for 5 or 6 years until that POL2 down the road, I don't know how temporary it truly is at that point, right? So I think that's more of a how are we envisioning getting it fit in there? Because if we don't have that answer solved, how do we know that what we're discussing now is even valid when you consider that big picture operation?
Go ahead, David.
So, well, I was going to say that the scope of this, the concept design with Jacobs, and then the full design with the design of record is all incorporated into the scope of the designer of record. And the designer of record is that Steve has mentioned several times is intended to be on board by the end of February, early March. And so that will be obviously an early item in their design. So that's when the more detailed discussions go on.
And in the meantime, you guys enjoy the fact that until the wrecking ball swings, you got 3 petroleum. You will eventually have 3 petroleum docks to play with.
Well, I think as POL2 silts in, it's going to be a dedicated barge dock. So I really appreciate it, Steve. Thank you.
Oh, well, then your worries are over. Mr. Owens?
At least temporarily. Thank you.
Mr. Owens, you have anything you want to say?
No, it's just been very interesting. I appreciate the opportunity to listen in.
Colby? I'll give you
I have
3 minutes.
nothing to add.
Okay, and have I missed anybody out there? We take inventory one last time. No, there's nobody else out there. Okay, thanks, everybody.
Steve, I apologize. Can I ask one more question? This is left for my window to speak up.
Go ahead.
So I know David mentioned that there are potential cost savings or opportunities for efficiency with the advisory board for that seismic resiliency. Do we only anticipate that savings to come through with this dock design, or would that be a cost savings opportunity regardless of the design?
Boy, David, I'll have to pitch that to you.
I'm not sure what you mean, Lev. From our perspective, we would be applying the interpretation of the seismic standards to the dock design. I don't, if and how it might impact operations and have cost savings there, I don't know. But our discussions and John's discussions with the GAC are focused purely on the dock design. That doesn't mean there aren't opportunities for other types of discussions with them, but ours is focused on that. All right, Lev, I don't know if you were commenting or not, but.
David, I apologize. I'm having some connectivity challenges. What I was asking is, if you're discussing some reduced seismic requirements, those would apply to the dock regardless of which design is utilized, the ones discussed now or the ones that were originally in the last basis of design, correct?
That's true. It would be whichever concept gets advanced, the application of them would be across any of them. Yeah.
Right. So when we talk about a potential cost savings, right, we're not really talking apples to apples. You're saying just because we use the number 30%, right, wrong, indifferent, even if you increase it by 30, cut that 30, you could be saving the same 30 or so from the current design. So I think that's
correct.
Just something to keep in mind. Yeah.
No, that was
Thank
merely that was merely intended to compare it to the current budget, the approved budget, and the funding requirements, right? But you're correct.
But I am happy to provide whatever support you need, because when we did this with the PCT, we realized that there were definitely some gaps in terms of what that committee viewed things as.
Okay. Okay, and John Daly is leading that charge primarily, and we're supporting him. But yeah, I'm sure he'll reach out. Oh yeah, John, I don't know if you wanted to comment on it, but yeah, support from the users could be helpful there.
They're discussing it now within the GAC committee. ASC 61 committee has provided revised language that helps clarify the issue. I don't think we need any user support at this time, but I appreciate it and be happy to talk in another forum or meeting as to what exactly is going on there. So
We may put that on the agenda for the next design advisory board meeting, which I suspect is going to happen sooner than rather than later. Just to give everybody a what's being looked at.
To discuss what's going on there at any time in a meeting.
And I apologize to Dave because here I am looking for people who are.
I figure you're working the universe first, then you're gonna come back.
No, shame on me. I was just being, I'm just being old.
No problem.
So the floor is yours, sir.
Well, I appreciate all the discussion and the work that went into preparing for it and everything. And, you know, just trying to be constructive and positive, but there's some things that I think it's really important for us to look back, not only as members of the public, interested parties, stewards of the public interest, to take us back 4 years ago when I first started getting a little closer to this issue. I remember the whole conversation was about, you know, replacing the existing infrastructure, right? So that we could continue to operate in the event of a natural disaster. Needed to be up. It's all about the pilings. I remember standing in front of the assembly and having several one-on-one meetings with assembly members, trying to rationalize to them why we even needed 2 cargo docks. Right? Because of the underutilization and the number was so small. So you take that conversation and you move it all the way to today's conversation. It seems like the pendulum has swung dramatically. And I understand, Steve, you and your teams, compelling need to do what's best for the port, given no limitations, which is really what you're saying. Damn the cost, it needs to be done, we'll fight it out. But the reality is there are costs to things, right? And as we march down this path, I think we have an obligation to the public to do right by them in terms of making sure that the city can be served and the state can be served. But at the same time, I think it's highly irresponsible for us to say, damn the cost. We can't run our businesses like that. And when you choose to do it, it translates to our cost model. And I think it's something that you need to be mindful of. We've gone to the state arm in arm, and we've said, here's our plan. We did that less than a year ago, probably 8-9 months ago. We said, here's a plan. We got on board, we supported that. State gave us a couple $100 million with some strings attached. Now we're gonna go to Juneau and say, that's not the plan anymore, but thanks for the money and we need some more. I mean, that's politics, right? That's gonna happen, but we need to be mindful of the fact that we're doing a little bit of a bait and switch here on some of our previous funding sources. And at the end of the day, feasibility has to be a consideration in these types of projects. And the more we keep reinventing the project, the longer it takes to get it done. There's no one at this room more than Tote and our family of companies that wants to get this thing done. We've been riding this pony for an awful long time. It needs to get done. We're not trying to stall. But at the end of the day, you also have to look at it. We're not here to talk about the tariff discussion today. Completely separate conversation. But how in anyone's rational thought process could you expect a company like Toad to vote for something like this when we're already in a separate discussion about having to share a disproportionate share of the burden? How do you get into a discussion where you can say, no, not only is this thing that you think is patently unfair and we're still discussing on the table, but now we're going to raise the bar even higher and make the numbers even bigger. There's no rational thought process that says, let's vote for that. I think we're putting the cart before the horse. So anyway, that's my 3 minutes. Thanks for the opportunity.
No, you bet. And from my point of view, when you're building a contiguous stock of equal width, then there is no disproportionate share. They're equal in size and they're equal in cost. In fact, you get 3 trestles, Matson gets 2.
So I've already used my 3 minutes, but
No, that's fine. I opened the door.
But you're the one that showed the rails in the photograph that had been there completely unused for 30 years. I was wondering, when we put the new rails in, are we gonna put concrete in those rails for safety purposes as
For
well?
safety purposes, yes, but that concrete mixture, and here I am practicing engineering without a license, it comes out very easily if there's a requirement to put those rails into service. There's a different.
I was being a little flippant. The point is,
But there is an answer to that.
the point is, regardless of whether we had tents out here 100 years or not, and I'm with you, Larry, I get it. We all love progress, but the reality of the situation is what we started out with 4 years ago gave us the full functionality of what we need to serve this market. And yes, there's some things that we can do to modernize it. This is an overbuild. And frankly, that's exactly what we were warned about by the assembly. And I realize we have elections and mindsets change and everything else, but I think there's going to be some pretty significant backlash just from the fact that we had planned. We went to Juneau, we got some money, we went to DC, we got some money, and now we're changing the plan. I mean, it looks a little bit like a shit show. And I guess it is.
Well,
but I just want you to understand, it's not for a lack of desire to move forward and have progress. It just, at some point.
Yeah.
You gotta quit, you gotta quit redoing it.
Well, and I couldn't agree more. And, you know, and I never much cared for that design. That was the first time, you know, it was done in the context of, oh my God, we can't, you know, we don't want to spend $2.2 billion on infrastructure. In a port, but it limits the flexibility that I believe we need to have to support the three missions that this port is responsible for, which come with expectations from not only the state, but from the DoD. And we can, you know, we're gonna argue this till the cows come home.
Yeah, we won't resolve it today.
No, and, but I am also, you know, I
But
also.
we can't agree that it's a shit show.
I'd like to not, but I'd also like, to say that, you know, I'm also, I also come from a world where I play the cards I'm dealt.
Sure.
So if you know, if this gets all the way to the assembly and the assembly says you're out of your fucking mind, you know, you're gonna go back to the original design and that's the end of it, then we'll do what we need to do. And I will extract myself from any conversation about how the cart to go with respect to a surcharge.
Appreciate that level of clarity, Steve.
Yeah, well, you know, it's forgive me, I work on the docks. It occasionally comes out.
If I could, you know, one thing I would say is that what you're about to vote on, and this aligns with what both Steve and you just said, Dave, is you're worried about things constantly changing. By moving forward with a design concept, you've locked in that design concept, assuming it goes through the whole process and the assembly approves it. So,
Which is what happened previously.
that's right.
To my
But what you're doing, it's absolutely an evolution, but it's an evolution that's now considering the full scope of the project. And when I say scope, I'm talking about the mission flexibility to hit Steve's three missions, or the dock flexibility to hit the three missions. And I think what the process that you're going through right now is to take care of the exact problem that you were discussing of, oh, it's always changing. Well, this is a lock-in point.
Okay. Yeah. It's pretty exciting. Actually gonna take 3 hours to do this. Any other discussion from any of the board members? I think, I appreciate the, you know, the public inputs and public comments as well. So if that's the case, then I'd like to call the question. So I'll need somebody to call the question and somebody to second it. At which time we can take a vote. I leave once that happens, I leave it up to every individual board member to decide whether they're gonna consider the cost component of this, although I appreciate everybody's opinion, and I don't want to hamstring anybody or force anybody to change where their point of view is on this. But I would like somebody to make a motion to vote on this, and then somebody to second it, please.
So Steve, just to confirm, the motion is to approve the 100-foot gauge crane and Terminal 1 and Terminal 2 having similar length and width.
Yes, so I went back to the meeting objective to refresh everybody. It's to concur, you know, with the mayor's request to make a cargo dock design that supports 100 gauge cranes. It has a continuous deck of equal width end to end with crane rail that runs the entire length. So it's a yes or no with respect to concurrence with that design objective as a basis for us to hand to the designer of record when they come on board in February. So I still need a motion and I need a second.
I'll make that motion, Steve. Okay.
If I move to table it until we actually include cost as a portion of this conversation? Is that something we can do? Because what I just heard is we'll leave it up to individual board members to take costs into perspective. I think that's, that would be my question. Can we table until cost and cost benefit is part of our conversation as a board?
Well, I'll tell you what, we have when I get a motion in a second, then there's a discussion before we vote. And if you'd like to make them, well, or we could, let's do it this way then. Let's entertain your motion to table it at this time.
Robert's rules, you can't do that, I think we already have a motion on the floor.
Well, I don't have a motion yet.
I thought that
You don't have a second, but
No, we don't have a second.
I'll second, but then you can do it, but you gotta follow Robert's rules. or
Okay.
Dave's gonna get on me and I don't know that.
No, that's, that's okay. I didn't hear Vic's motion, so I didn't think we have one at all. Okay, so I have a motion and a second. And so now we'll go ahead and
Yeah, I would move the table to vote until incremental cost with this change in design is known, even to an estimated level to be part of the discussion on this vote. That makes sense.
yes. So that motion needs a second.
Second,
Okay, so let me. So I will call for a vote on tabling tabling this decision until there's more cost information available. So Art? On the motion to table?
Yeah.
Okay. Larry?
Let me think about that. Go around the board. I'm thinking.
Okay, Vic?
Question? Say again?
This is a motion to table the decision until there's more preliminary cost information to factor into the decision.
And how long is that gonna take?
David?
Well, I can get you more preliminary cost information. You got to tell me what preliminary cost information you need, because as far as I'm concerned, the preliminary cost information is out there. This certainly can't wait till the design of record is on board, because if the design of record's on board, they're going to be ready to move ahead with the design and start optimizing. So you stand to delay the project. I mean, I think we've provided enough ballpark information to make the decision, but that's obviously up to the board. I'm not on the board. But you'll have to tell me exactly what costs you're actually looking for. Because I think one of the things that Art said was about the benefit, and the benefit has to come from the users. Those calculations have to come from the users.
Yeah, but there's
So-
more benefit to that than just the users. It's about the benefit to the municipality as well, right?
Right. So
As a user, we would make our own interpretation based on
Right.
the cost.
So
So that's
we,
the reason I asked that, just because, what are we looking for, right? We're gonna get into so much detail.
well, and that's
part
what
of-
I'm saying. I mean,
Yeah,
you tell me
that's
what
part of
costs
the
you need, I can
discussion.
get you costs in a matter of days. They'd be preliminary costs, but I can get you costs in a matter of days. But what else are you looking for before you take this vote? Because that some of that might come from us, but a lot of it's going to come from the user and the municipality. The user.
It's a good point, Nick. So if I understood you, what you're saying then, we know then the incremental cost will be 150 to 200, might potentially, but we're not showing any benefit for that. And I guess that's my whole point of, we're now agreeing to reset the baseline at $200 million incremental cost without showing a benefit for it, outside of kind of a subjective, hey, we could potentially do this.
Well, and here's, again, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but here's how I look at it. I look at it as the benefit for us is the ability to have a facility that is flexible enough to continue to support everybody that we support now with a new modern facility. in the way we can support them now, because it's just a more modern and a little bit bigger version of that which we have today. But I get it. When you look at it, you don't care about any of that. You just care about what the commercial implications to your business are. And I have to respect that as well. So, and so I look at the benefit, and I wouldn't have said, half of what I said today if I didn't find that there was value in going down this road. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. And I don't, I'm not going to change my position on that. And, and I know I'm backing a higher cost. But the fact of the matter is, I never liked that first design in the first place. It was a capitulation to the assembly, who gagged when they heard $2.2 million for the cost of the project.
Yeah, and my point is that
That was billion, Steve.
today that costs are being incorporated into it. And I think as a design advisory board, it needs to be a major component of what we're talking about, not just the design. So that was why I wanted to table it. You had said in your preamble to look for the motion to vote that it'll be up to individual board members to understand to decide if they want to include costs in their decision-making process. To me, that's actually the responsibility of our design advisory board. So that's why I was looking to table it.
And fortunately, there's 5 of us, and it's not a dictatorship. So I will, I'll support what the majority chooses to do.
And to Dave Carb's points that he made earlier about, changing our plan, even if we go with this, I think the points for changing it need to be articulated a lot better, because it's going to be a larger group wanting answers on why we're changing this, and especially this $150 to $200 million.
Well, it's just the Port of Alaska. There's always going to be a larger group that's going to have, that's going to want to stick their 2 cents worth into everything that goes on down here. And this is a big project, so it's got a lot of attention, whether any of us like it or not. But, and we'll deal with that when the time comes. My concern is, do we have a defendable position? Do I have a defendable position when I speak on behalf of what I believe the port needs, which I know 9 times out of 10 is not going to be in concert with what the users need, because our end requirements are vastly different. And we've had that discussion before. If you guys were if you owned that berth, you would build it exactly the way you want to build it. But that's not how we rule here. It's the municipal dock that is yours 2 days a week, mine the other 5. And that's got to count for something with respect to my dislike for what that first design does to my ability to do everything we need to do. And it's going to cost money to change it. And I get that. And
you can see from our perspective too, I think I heard, and this is where we need to lay it out to Bert's point a little bit better. David say earlier that, there might be it's an extra $40 million for this new hatch cover change that the mayor acquiesced for Matson. That's a user requirement that we should lay out, right? This is what Matson asked for. That's what I heard, but it's not laid out clearly, but that's incremental cost now the project is going to take on. And to Dave's point, what's being proposed, we all pay for it, specifically the other cargo user, based on a user preference. That's clear to me in any of this stuff that we're putting forward, nor was it disseminated to us beforehand. So that's a big cost component that we should likely talk about.
But it's more than just hatch covers and terminal 1.
But it was brought up today. It just, those are the things that why I can't,
to me,
I can't rationally vote.
Yeah, it's more. It's what's going to give us the ability to support every mission we possibly can in the 70 years that this has come, that this is going to be in service. That's that's the context I'm looking at this in.
But in a uniform tariff, right, we'll pay for half of that user requirement at T1, and now we're duplicating the whole thing in T2 with the user preference that we weren't including.
Well, your PUAs are designed exactly that way now.
I understand that, but we're talking about a cost component now that was decided without this group's input, right? And that's another piece where I don't think we're ready to vote.
Well, Vic, that was a lot of information. It's on you. How do you feel about this? And I guess I've got to ask
Well,
David.
Yeah, I mean, for me, you know, I actually hate the fact that people are hanging a hatch cover on this thing. It's not a sole hatch cover issue here. I mean, if they decided that the municipality wanted to go to 100 gauge, that's fine. We'll go to 100 gauge, right? If we can put a hatch cover on the dock, we're going to put a hatch cover on the dock because that's standard. If it's not going to work that way, then so be it. But that's not, I'm just biting my lip here, but it's not a hatch cover issue that's changing this whole design. So I've been more supportive of the fact that the municipality has decided that this is a long-term goal for the municipality and not Matson. So I'm going with the design that's being presented. So my vote on this thing is to vote on it now as proposed, 100 gauge crane, and not push this off any longer, because I think we're asking for details that's going to take a while longer that we can hash out while we're in the design phase. So my vote is to vote on it today as presented in the meeting objective.
So he's voting no on the motion to table.
Yeah, the motion on the table is the table, and that's a no vote on the motion to
It's a
table.
no vote on the table. Yeah.
Bert?
I vote yay, we table it.
No, I'm concerned about the timing and the delay that it would inflict on the project, and we know every day that we delay raises the price, and so I'm
And that leaves me, and I'm going to be a no vote on table. Which brings us back to the original, the reason was to a motion to approve, or a motion to vote, or concur with the mayor's, with the mayor's objective. I need somebody to make the motion in a second.
I make the motion. Vic.
Second. Okay, Larry seconds. We'll do the same order. Art?
As a Representative Tope, shareholders are customers. We can't in good faith vote to invest in incremental infrastructure that provides unknown benefits. It's without a clear revenue stream, it should be done with extreme caution. So we're no.
That's a no vote. Okay. Dick?
Yes.
No.
No. Larry?
No.
Yes. Thank you. Got it. Okay, and I'm a yes vote also. So the motion passes. Now, according to the Design Advisory Board, as it's stated in code, there's an opportunity for, well, I don't have it here to read. Provide a dissenting opinion to, in this case, the mayor. Because what comes out of this meeting goes to the mayor for consideration. And he can modify it any darn way he wants before he sends it to the assembly. So you'll get, what I will do is not send this tomorrow. How's that? Because you guys probably want some time to formulate that dissenting opinion. How long do you
Steve, I
think?
have that language at my fingertip here.
Oh,
The code provides that if a recommended document is not recommended on a unanimous vote, any member not voting in favor of the recommended document may transmit to the mayor a minority report.
okay. So that it doesn't mean that you have to put your head together with Bert. You can individually decide how you want to respond to that. Okay.
So with all due respect, Steve, I'd suggest that you maybe pull the members who didn't vote with the majority as to what would be a reasonable time for preparing the report and set a deadline for transmission.
I was about to do that, Bob. Which I think I started to, but then you found the exact language, so I appreciate that. So yeah, really, how much time would you like?
You know, it shouldn't take long, but we have holidays, so it'd give us into January. Possible. So months, is that too much?
Not for me. Well, we're there. Doesn't matter. This is,
You say into January?
It's a month, so if you give us a month from today,
till,
yeah, January 20th.
which happens to be a Friday. Okay,
So
all right. I think that'll work. Then what I will do is,
I don't know if it works for Bert.
Bert, were you gonna write your own separate dissenting opinion?
No. I'll coordinate with Toad.
Yeah, so that puts us on a track where I have to now look at what the assembly schedule is going to be for February. Because this won't get in front of the assembly until February, but I'll get the information to the mayor and I will tell the mayor that he needs to be prepared for a dissenting opinion from at least one of the two parties. And it'll be what it'll be. We know we've got the designer of record vote. Once we meet on the 12th, the selection committee meets on the 12th. It's going to go to the purchasing office and on and on and on before it gets on the assembly agenda. And I'll talk David I'll talk with David and Eric and find out if it matters what comes first. Yeah, so, okay. And I just put this up here, because this is, what the code says about deciding when we meet. We need to meet at least twice a year. My gut tells me, once we get into this with the designer of record, there's going to be a frequency involved that's going to see us all together at different milestones during the design process. And there's the criteria that drives whether or not, we have a meeting with respect to a change in the design, or it just goes. And then, again, we owe you quarterly reports. So if we want to kind of ballpark, we don't have to come up with a definite date on the calendar now. Do we want to ballpark a time to get back together? If we're doing it a couple of times a year, I think maybe early spring would be when the designer of record might have something they can share with us of substance, regardless of what the basis of design turns out to be. March. All right, so I will put on my calendar to start looking for a date in March for us to just convene and get a progress report from the designer of record. Eric?
I think it might actually be April would probably be better because looking at the way the process works to get a designer record on board and kicked off, we don't plan on kicking them off to the first week of March. For the designer record standpoint, so.
Early April be okay? I mean, and if for no other reason, just to meet the players.
Certainly meet any other time if something comes up, so no
Yeah,
problem with
yeah,
that.
well, yeah, that's the thing is, we may find ourselves meeting again anyhow, sooner rather than later. Okay. That brings us to closing board member comments. Anything any members of the board want to mention that you haven't said already?
Yes, thank you for holding the meeting today since I'm leaving tomorrow. That's what's up. And I'm a great grandparent.
Nice.
Just 2 days ago. So
Nice.
It's great.
Hang on, let me stop sharing this so I can look at everybody's smiling face to wrap this up. Okay. Bert, Vic, any closing comments?
No, sir.
Nope, nothing rare.
Nor do I. my gut told me.
This was gonna say Merry Christmas.
Are there no poorhouses? Are there no prisons? No. A Merry Christmas to everybody. Thank you once again for your candor. This is not easy stuff. And this is where we find, government and juxtaposed to the private sector. And not only the way we look at things, but what we consider important. And those are hard differences to work through. And so I appreciate all the angst. And all the honesty. So with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
There we go. We got to. Thank you all.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas.
I'm gonna stop the recording once I figure out.
You already